me just check that. Yeah, we're live now. Welcome everyone. This is a National Citizens Alliance presentation on trade, tariffs, so-called free trade, and Canadian manufacturing. And I'm pleased to welcome Adam Roulston from Ottawa, NCA member, who's joined me tonight. Thank you for joining the NCA and this discussion tonight, Adam.
Of course, thank you for having me.
And before we get started, everyone, I just want to touch on a few issues and key points that we feel that are important. So the first one, this is a post we made earlier in the week, but it's about settling for the lesser of the evil. And we believe that this approach of when you're deciding electorally for the lesser of the evil, that's what a lot of Canadians have been doing for decades and decades. It's actually supporting evil. It's supporting the same status quo. So the whole approach of the lesser of the evil has actually contributed significantly to the mess we're in today. So National Citizens Alliance is asking Canadians to think beyond the lesser of the evil, because you're only hurting our country, because you're supporting evil at the end of the day. So let's get beyond that, everyone. Do not support evil, because look at the mess our country is in. It's only going to get worse. We're in a crisis in this country today. Another point I want to make, we made a statement in regard to our convention coming up on November 10th. We made it very clear. We said no career politicians, no lawyers, no banksters, no suits. And we made a post today clarifying what we mean, and I'm going to touch on it right now. But the first one, no career politicians. The National Citizens Alliance believes that serving your country as an MP should not entail being a career politician. In our view, this is about an opportunity to serve your community, to give back to your community and country. It should never be about a career. And the National Citizens Alliance rejects these career politicians, and we want to drain and replace them with our candidates who are non-career. And just please remember, these career politicians, they get so entrenched into the cesspool of corruption in Ottawa, and which is tied to all these special interests, globalist interests, and lobbyists. That's who they are. And we want to drain this. We want to drain them out of Ottawa. People shouldn't be in it for the money. They shouldn't be in it for their ego. It's about serving your community and country. And that's what we stand for. In regard to lawyers, obviously not all lawyers are bad, but they have a reputation of lying and stealing. And they are the establishment, the status quo. They represent the law of this country, which is the status quo. So we're saying no lawyers as MPs. We don't want them. Sure, they can be consultants on legislation. But in the NCA, we don't want them as MPs. We will not accept them. Because we can't have this lying and stealing, all this stuff going on. We are non-establishment. In regard to banksters, they are tied to the supreme corruption in our country, which is the central bankers' control over the money supply, the fiat currency, and the 64 billion plus debt service payments we do to them on all levels of government every year. These banksters are at the pinnacle of the corruption, and this started in 1974 when Pierre Trudeau caved into the central banksters and shifted the public lending right from the Bank of Canada to the central banksters. Now they're printing money and charging compound interest as soon as they print it. We are getting fleeced as a country. This is fiat money. It has no value in it. These banks control the wealth of the country. Your wealth. We want to revert back to the true Bank of Canada, which issues currency at 0% interest, and then value is created through that currency. Then you can charge interest, but not at the beginning. So this is something the National Citizens Alliance takes very seriously, and we want to get back to the true Bank of Canada. And this is when the country took the turn for the worse in our young history. In the early 1970s under Pierre Trudeau, and it's just gotten worse. You can look at the massive debt in our country. It doesn't matter what color of government is in power, but it's just gotten worse every year. Every year, these globalists have basically taken over our country. The Canadian electorate act like sheep. They act like sheep. They're afraid to stand up for the truth. They're afraid to do what's right. Instead, they conform to the status quo. They're like being farmed. We have a video on that. They're like cattle, herded, controlled on many levels. That's what's going on. The electorate in Canada is like herded cattle. So we got to wake up. The country's in crisis on so many fronts. Immigration, taxation, the bank, the debt, the rising unemployment, the money flowing out of the country in foreign aid, the cronyism and corruption in Ottawa, the fake news, so many Canadians living in poverty right now. There's so many issues. Our veterans. There's a lot of issues, everyone. We need to wake up. This corrupt establishment is destroying our country we love. We're at a crisis point. And one final point, I just want to update everyone on the declarations and the registration process of National Citizens Alliance. We submitted our registration package about 3 weeks ago, and it was just confirmed to us on September 27th, 2018. Elections Canada confirmed that the package is complete. So we're waiting for Elections Canada, actually for the Chief Electoral Officer to say everything is okay, and then they will begin confirming the declarations that we mailed to them. So we will do an update on that, our registration process. So the next step will be the Chief Electoral Officer confirming, and then they will start confirming the declarations, and we will do an announcement on that. So it's a slow process. We're doing everything we can, but it's outside of our means. So hopefully we hear from Elections Canada soon, and we can get through this process. Now I'm going to turn to Adam. Adam, I want you to jump right into these issues. We just had the U.S. NCA trade deal just passed, so we're going to have to talk about that tonight. But I can tell you that we're very concerned about these globalist trade deals like TPP, which actually was agreed to and was signed on to on January 23rd, 2018. A lot of people don't know that. The Canadian people weren't consulted. This is a secret trade deal that supports the big banks, the big corporations, and also the multinational corporations. The majority of the Canadian people do not benefit from these big deals. They erode our sovereignty, Adam. They erode our sovereignty. So this is what's going on, everyone. These career politicians, these globalists in Ottawa are pushing these big trade deals like TPP. And it's just for the big interests. And just look at the bailouts. Bombardier bailing out banks. Now they can take what? up to what, 30% plus of your savings if they're in trouble. These are the crooks that are controlling the country, and these career politicians are tied to them. Mistake not. Jump in, Adam, please.
Well, the thing you say about TPP and NAFTA is interesting because TPP was first introduced, gosh, I can't remember, 2015, 2016, and it failed because public uproar. People didn't want it. The people saw through it as globalist nonsense, and the government retracted it. And then they did what the whole globalist regime did, is they hide it for a couple of years, they forget about it, and then when the public is obsessed with something new in the media, they bring it back and pass it behind closed doors. They did it with TPP. They did it with NAFTA, renamed the US, Mexico, Canada agreement, whatever. And this isn't just in Canada. I mean, the European Union does the same thing. The European Union tried to pass something called the European Constitution. The European public completely rejected it. They renamed it the Lisbon Treaty and then ratified it without the European Parliament voting on it. So this is something to note, that the globalists, when they fail the first time, they put it on the back burner, they bring it back a couple of years later, and they pass it.
Yeah, you know what's interesting about the TPP is the federal government is pushing it, it's lowering tariffs. Like somehow it benefits the average Canadian. This is just a spin, Adam. This is all about the big banks. This is all about big business. It's about the multinational corporation. It's about globalist control. It's creating unfair competition for these big entities. That's what's going on with these deals. And it's eroding our sovereignty on so many fronts. And we can look at the investor dispute resolution in TPP. This is allow investors to override our laws. Adam?
Yeah, exactly.
This is what's going on with those deals. And the government is in the middle, and they're benefiting because they're charging, tariffs, duties, and other taxation on goods, but they're kind of like a middleman. But then they spit it. Somehow the average Canadian is benefiting. We're losing our jobs in manufacturing to these countries in Asia that are charging labor costs, what, $1 an hour?
$1 a day.
Yeah, $1 a day, 10 cents a day.
And the big corporations are pushing this because of transnationalism. Why would you want to pay your workers $15, $20 an hour, obey all of our regulation, be put under risk of having to pay carbon tax, when you could move everything to, say, Malaysia or Vietnam, pay them $1 a day, you don't obey any regulation because there's none, you can pump whatever crap you want into the atmosphere. This is why the liberals, the globalists, the big corporations are pushing free trade, because it benefits the big corporations, not the Canadian people.
Excellent point. I'm going to double down on what you're saying. It's an excellent point. These corporations want to get access to these countries to set up shop there. Right? That's basically what you said. They have way lax environmental laws. They have way less government intrusion. Right? So that's what's going on, isn't it?
Exactly.
Isn't that terrible, everyone? Isn't that terrible? This is the reality of it. And let's talk a little about the USMCA, the new NAFTA agreement. I'm very concerned. U.S. is our major ally, our neighbor, our most significant trading partner, Adam. And here we have a government that's so belligerent to the U.S. And we have a establishment media. All they do is attack Trump as a bully, and they vilify. This is nonsensical. We need good relations with the U.S. Attacking Trump is not in our interest. But this deal was secret too. I don't know what these liberal political hacks were doing for months, Adam. Wasting our tax dollars. What did they accomplish? Look at this deal. Look at it. It's not much different from NAFTA. And then they got clause 32 in there, which erodes our sovereignty, Adam. And what clause 32 says is that if Canada, for example, wants to sign a trade deal with China, they must notify Mexico and the U.S., and if either Mexico or U.S. does not agree with that deal, they can give 6 months notice to leave the USMCA. Adam?
Yeah, yeah.
So I don't fault the U.S. for putting that provision in there, because they have way more economic leverage over us because they're 10 times bigger.
Yeah, and that's the problem. It's really hard to stay competitive when you're next to a superpower like the United States. I mean, there's been very few prime ministers in Canadian history that have been willing to stand up and negotiate and stand our ground when it comes to the United States, whether it be trade, diplomacy,
right,
things like NAFTA.
How do you feel about the dairy? It's gone from 1% access to now 3.6%. And that's pretty insignificant still, right? That's only 3% of the Canadian dairy market the U.S. now has access to. They also have access to other agricultural sectors such as chicken, turkey, egg markets, and U.S. wines in BC can be sold at state-owned liquor stores. So, we believe that some form of tariffs is good for the Canadian economy, right?
Yeah, precisely. You need to protect our industries. You need to protect our manufacturing from more industrious, more efficient economies like the United States, who will gobble up what's left of our manufacturing sector if we give them the chance, if we get free trade with them.
Exactly. So there has to be a balance, everyone, between protectionism and non-protectionism. You can't have outright free trade because Canadian industries can't compete, especially with countries in Asia and where they're paying $1 a day to the workers, and the environmental regulations are so lax. How do they compete? And then you got the U.S., like you said, a massive market. They can come in and undercut, and
this is why we need tariffs on, for example, steel, because why would any contractor, building company in Canada buy Canadian steel when you can buy American steel for less? And that's what tariffs do. They offset the price just a little bit, so it's just a little bit cheaper to buy Canadian steel. That's how you protect an industry. That's how you protect a manufacturing sector.
Exactly, and that's what Trump supports. He brags about tariffs on U.S. industries because he's protecting the industries and he's also protecting American jobs. So, and that's something we support as a party. We want to find a balance, everyone. You don't want excessive protectionism because then it's hurting the consumer, right? You have to find a balance there. But we need to protect Canadian jobs. We need to protect Canadian industries, but you have to find the right balance. But would you say the dairy board has gone too far?
Well, Maxime Bernier has a point when he says our dairy industry is behaving as a cartel. But at the same time, his policy, complete free trade when it comes to dairy, is the exact opposite direction of what we need to do. We need to find a balance. We need to find a way of keeping our dairy industry self-sufficient and functioning, be able to feed our population through our dairy industry, but not have the problem of the cartel where they keep it from growing, where they keep it from being profitable.
Exactly. So, and it's just finding that balance. But, this Bernie guy says no tariffs. Like, that's just going to destroy the industry, isn't it?
Yeah,
it doesn't make sense.
Absolutely.
That's just a globalist thing to say, isn't it? It's completely nonsensical. But I'm not going to talk too much about the USMCA, everyone. We want to read the document once we get a copy of it. But we did note that Section 19, dispute resolution is still intact. And it means that if there's any disputes on the Canadian side, it would go to Canadian court. But the U.S., please remember, the U.S. still has the leverage. They still have the leverage because they're 10 times bigger. And, it's in our interest to have the best possible relations with the U.S. and we want fair trade. We didn't see anything unfair in this agreement. Trump is being portrayed as a bully, but even when it comes to clause 32, that's fair, because it means all parties. Doesn't say the U.S. signs an agreement with China, they still have to come back to Canada and Mexico. And the bottom line is that they have the economic leverage, so it's in our interest to get along with them. And what is this balance, Adam? Reaching this balance between tariffs and non-tariffs. How do we know then when we're at the optimum?
Well, Sir John A. Macdonald, when he was Prime Minister, passed something called the National Policy, which is a very important piece of legislation, and I don't think you can really talk in depth about Canadian manufacturing without keeping it in mind. Because even back then, John A. Macdonald knew that Canada, especially our manufacturing sector, would have a very difficult time competing with the superpower of the United States. So what his policy did was it balanced tariffs with free trade in a way that allowed our manufacturing sector to grow and prosper without the government being overbearing. And the way it did this was any raw materials that Canada could acquire, steel, copper, gold, silver, lumber, dairy, there were heavy tariffs on to keep those industries safe and thriving in Canada. But any raw goods we did not have or could not get in Canada, which we did not have access to, was free trade. Same for consumer goods, manufactured goods. Anything that we could produce in Canada was tariffed to protect our industry, but anything we could not manufacture, we had free import on. And I think that's something we really need to bring back to Canada. I mean, Justin Trudeau put a tariff on aluminum, which makes no sense. Canada does not produce aluminum. What are you protecting when you put a tariff on aluminum? When you put a tariff on something we need to bring in, all you're doing is you're taking money out of the private sector and giving it to the government.
Excellent point. Excellent point. So do you want to summarize that for everyone? Just so everyone understands?
Yeah, to put it simply, the best way to balance tariffs with free trade is to put tariffs on any goods that we can produce or create in Canada, just enough to offset the price so that buying domestically is a bit less expensive. Anything we cannot acquire or produce in Canada, free trade to make it easier for Canadian consumers and businesses to get what they need.
Yeah, it's an excellent, and that was that's a basic concept, everyone, and it's actually it's putting our country first, isn't it? And our industries, our jobs first.
Exactly, putting the people first. Exactly,
and I just want, this Bernier guy, as far as we're concerned, the guy's a bankster, lawyer, Adam. His father was an MP. He was in Harper, the Harper regime. The first year he became a minister. The guy's just, he's full-on establishment, career politician. And he's pulling a fast one over the Canadian people, right? He's trying to bring a bit of nationalism in, but he's really a globalist at its core. And we can see this in the guy's trade policies. Look here, and I put this up here, Adam. He wants to go beyond Trans-Pacific Partnership. He wants aggressive free trade, Adam. And he's talking about free trade with India, China. Here's the thing on China.
When we say aggressive, we're not...
He wants a Canada free trade deal. Again, that's just the U.S. is gonna just counter that, right? It doesn't make sense, right?
Yeah.
And but this is pure globalism, everyone. Anyone who's supporting these mega trade deals like TPP is in bed with big business. They're in bed with the banks, the central banks. They're in bed with the multinational corporations. This is not benefiting the majority of the Canadian people. And what it's doing is what Adam said. It's allowing big business to go into these other countries and set up shop there, where they can pay people $1 a day. They can, they have very lax environmental laws. And these banks are benefiting because they're funding it. And then they're getting interest back. This is not helping the Canadian people. This is not helping the Canadian people, Adam. This is globalism. This has nothing to do with conservative values. Aggressive free trade, globalist free trade is not free trade. It benefits the multinational corporations. It benefits the big business. It's unfair trade, actually. And it's globalist control. That's what this Bernier guy is all about. And that's what he's pushing. And people need to wake up. Don't be a sheep. Don't be a sheep and listen to the mainstream media. Think for yourself. This is just globalism being pushed on you. And you're being told how to think. And what, and then it's portrayed, Adam, I can't believe it's portrayed as true conservative values, when what it is globalist values. What does being conservative have to do with being aggressive, unfair trade? Labeled as aggressive free trade. What does that have to do with conservative values?
Yeah, free trade has never been a conservative principle.
I know. And it's being pushed. Harper pushed it. This Bernier guy who was a Harper lackey is now pushing it. And it's all about big business, the banks, which he's tied to, and these multinational corporations. And then you can tie in the United Nations. This is global world order, Adam. That's all it is. So people are going to have to wake up. If you're going to be a sheep, you're going to, the sheeps are going to get taken advantage of. You're going to be a cattle, you're going to be herded, you're going to be controlled. You got to decide for yourself. What kind of future do you want? Are you just going to be herded and controlled and brainwashed and indoctrinated? This is just basic. And I'm dumbfounded why Canadians are like sheep. And the big telling of these establishment parties and these entrenched establishment people is their access to the establishment media, Adam. Whereas NCA is completely vilified. We're either blacked out or we're vilified. And what more do you need to know? But we pride ourselves on being non-career, non-establishment, pro-Canadian. But Canadians, the light bulb's going to have to go on in your brain. These globalist trade deals are not in your best interest. They're unfair trade favoring big business, multinational corporations, big banks. That's who they benefit. They're going to suck our manufacturing out of here even more. We're going to lose jobs here. Do you want to comment, Adam?
Says, sorry?
Do you want to comment on this?
Yeah, I was just going to say, Maxime Bernier says in his policy that free trade with China will create 25,000 new well-paying jobs. What he's missing out is that those will all be big investor, big businessman style jobs. And that's just gross job creation. When you factor in the net job creation, all the jobs lost, we're at a net loss when it comes to jobs. We're going to lose thousands of manufacturing jobs and thousands of well-paying jobs as well. Look what happened when Prime Minister Mackenzie, for example, opened up free trade in the 40s. We lost aerospace industry. We lost engineering jobs. We lost design jobs. So we're going to have a net loss of jobs when it comes to things like free trade with China. We need to balance free trade with tariffs. That's how you create jobs.
Exactly. We got to protect our industries. We got to protect our jobs. Canadian people, Canada must come first. We can't put globalist interests before our people. And these globalist big trade deals are doing that. So don't get fooled. They're really about unfair trade. They're about big business, multinational corporations, and these big banks all benefiting. And these corporations are just going to set up shop in China even more. And the goods are going to be sent back here. Adam?
Yeah.
I don't know what we're going to have left. Look at FIPA. Harper signed a 35-year secret deal with China already. And there was investor rights in that, where Chinese companies can come into Canada and override our laws and sue the government if there's any perceived unfair competitive advantage. So this is erosion of sovereignty. We need to protect Canadian sovereignty. We need to protect Canadian industry. We need to protect Canadian jobs.
Yeah, exactly. Like, there was something in the news a while ago where a Chinese company was trying to buy Aecon, which is one of our huge construction companies. And when a foreign company owns a Canadian business, where is the net cash flow going out of Canada? We're losing money.
Exactly. Look at the oil sands. Look at our textile industries. They've been crushed. Our oil industry in Canada has been crushed. Our textile is nearly non-existent. And then we got the dairy in Quebec and Ontario. And the problem with that is it's almost too concentrated. So we have to find a balance there again between tariffs and non-tariffs. But the bottom line is we need to protect Canadian jobs. We need to protect Canadian industry. And people got to see the big picture on these big trade deals. They are not in your best interest. But they're being pushed by the mainstream corporate media. Because a lot of big business is tied to that media. Multinational companies pay for their advertisements, so they're pushing that agenda. So this is very disturbing, isn't it, Adam?
Yeah, exactly. It's the globalist control on Canada, the big three parties.
Plus Bernie now.
Yeah, the big corporations. They're all working together to open up our borders, move our manufacturing jobs overseas, and we need to fight back.
Exactly, just like Brexit, right?
Exactly.
It was the same thing, Brexit, and this is very disconcerting, everyone. I guess the good silver lining is that Trump can end these globalist deals now going forward with Clause 32 out of the U.S. MCA. Because he's going to be taking on the Chinese, Adam, and their unfair trade practices.
Yeah, good.
So that's going to squash people like Bernie and his globalist plans, right? So this is very concerning, everyone. If you have any questions, please email them to us at info@nationalcitizensalliance.ca. Please email any questions at info@nationalcitizensalliance.ca, and we would be happy to respond to them. Did you see any questions there, Adam, that we can address?
Oh, let me take a look.
But I should add further, the basic trade policy of the National Citizens Alliance is smart, fair trade in the best interest of our people and country. And it's about balancing tariffs with non-tariffs. And as Adam said, it's going back to Sir John A. Macdonald, and his basic trade approach was protect our industries where we're producing. But don't put tariffs where we're not producing, because that's only hurting the Canadian consumer. But I'm gonna
Any questions sent by email yet?
I'd have to check.
Okay.
This is our trade and environment policy right here. I'm just putting up, everyone. It's about protecting our sovereignty, working with other countries, economic efficiency. Also consulting Canadians on trade. You know, we're tired of the secret deals, Adam. We want smart, fair trade. We want to protect our industries, protect our jobs. And we're doing a terrible job. This globalist establishment is really harming Canadian jobs and industries with its globalist agenda.
Yeah, and you said the U.S.-Mexico-Canada agreement was negotiated behind closed doors. They do it behind closed doors because they're scared. They know the people don't like it. They know the people don't want it. They have to do it behind closed doors.
Exactly. And then they have all these corporate lobbyists who are there as well, pushing their agenda through the deal. And that's what's going on, everyone. This is not in your interest. This does not benefit you and your family. It does not. We're losing jobs, and these big corporations, these banks, multinational corporations are benefiting. It's all about unfair control, globalist control over Canada and other countries. And it's tied to the United Nations. So this is what's going on. I just put that thing there, so I'm just gonna look on here. So why do you think we deviated? These are just globalist sellouts in our country?
Sorry, could you clarify what you mean?
Why do you think we deviated so much from Sir John A. Macdonald's common sense approach?
Well, national policy was dismantled by the Liberals. Liberal is supposedly synonymous with freedom.
Right.
So the Liberals have always been the party that have tried to take down tariffs, establish free trade. We saw even as early as Wilfrid Laurier trying to dismantle our tariffs and manufacturing sector. Mackenzie took down a bit of it. Pearson took down a bit of it. And then since then, the Conservatives have stopped being conservative. They have stopped trying to look after the Canadian economy. They've just followed suit with this whole free trade globalist thing because they get all the support from the big corporations who want the free trade to move the means of production overseas.
Exactly. So that's what's going on, everyone. Unfortunately, I can't access the comments because they're streaming live. But we will look back at the comments and address them afterwards. And so this is just an introduction. We want to get people thinking about this issue. We're very concerned about this globalist agenda. It's anti-Canadian. It's not putting our people first. It's not putting our country first. It's putting globalist interests first. And look at Bombardier as an example, everyone. Look at the money flowing to these big corporations in this crony capitalism, this corporate welfare. Meanwhile, they're outsourcing jobs to Mexico and other countries. Look at the bailouts of these banks and big businesses, auto industry. Look at the required, in a severe recession, the government has actually legislated so they can come and take your savings to support the banks. These central banksters are controlling our country. It's a fiat fake currency. It has no value. They're charging compound interest. They're creating inflation, which is a higher cost of living for you and your family. There's extreme debt service payments, 64 billion plus as a country as a whole, every year to these central banksters. every year. That's what's going on, everyone. And there's a good chance that this fiat fake system of money may implode, because there's no real wealth behind it. They are controlling our wealth through the fiat currency. And that's why we talk about it. It's central to everything going on, and it's tied into these globalist trade deals. Because these banks are funding these deals overseas, and they're getting interest. They're giving loans to these big companies. They're all interconnected. They're tied to these crony politicians like Bernier, and he's a bankster lawyer. Where do you think he's getting his money from? But this is very concerning, everyone. We want people to wake up, to see the big picture of what's going on. You are being played, you're being fooled, you're being deceived. They're telling you that globalist free trade is true conservative values. Like, if you believe that, there's something wrong with you. If you're just taking that in, you're being herded. You're a sheep. You're like cattle. You need to wake up and question what you're being told, because it's not benefiting you or your family. Do you want to add anything in closing?
Well, on the subject of Bombardier, it's really quite sad. In the 1930s and the 1940s, Canada led the world in aerospace. Like, we had the Avro program. We had a good half dozen big aerospace design and manufacturing companies. But then we opened up our economy. They all left, were bought out by American companies. Now our last aerospace company is Bombardier, and it's on life support. We're keeping it alive with subsidies.
Millions of dollars while they outsource.
Exactly.
Yeah, and then they have ties to these big parties. And there's executive members of Bombardier on the Trudeau Foundation. There's money changing back and forth. This is what's going on with your tax dollars. It's very concerning. But please remember, if anything from tonight, that these globalists, big globalist trade deals are not in you and your family's best interest. This is globalist control. These are big companies, multinational companies, big banks, creating unfair advantage for them and allowing them to do business wherever they want within these trade deals. And it's like Adam said, setting up shop in these other countries and then flowing the product back into Canada. It's very concerning, everyone, very concerning. And I guess the silver lining, at least Trump gets it. He understands that he needs to protect American jobs. He needs to protect American industry, and he does that through tariffs and Trump trade negotiations. But what we have in Canada are globalist sellouts. People like Bernier, that bankster lawyer who's into globalist free trade, which means he's tied to the big banks, the big corporations, and these multinational corporations, which do not care about you and Canadian sovereignty. They could not give a heck about you and your family, or about Canadian identity, culture, or anything like that. We're just another market. That's all it is, and that's what's going on. It's very sad, everyone. And please share this message tonight. And we have a really good presentation tomorrow night. It's going to build off this. And we have Adrian, the Maritimes Regional Coordinator, coming on. And we're going to talk about nationalism versus globalism. So it's going to build off this at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time tomorrow night. And we want to wish everyone a great evening tonight. And let's keep up the fight for our people, our country. This country is at crossroads. We've been sold out by a globalist establishment. We're losing our identity, our culture, our heritage. The country is under invasion, and it's worse. The banksters have complete control over our money supply, our country. They control our government, and this is what's going on. We need a major shake-up in this country. It has become so corrupt. And then you have the fake media spinning their lies and misinformation every day. And we just need everyone to wake up and see through it. And we have to reclaim our country. We're going to lose it. We're turning into a globalist village, which is what these globalists want. They have no allegiance to Canada. They're multinational corporations. They could not give a heck about Canada. And these are the people that are making decisions for you and your family. Do you want to add anything else, Adam?
Well, just in order to really drill this point home about free trade versus tariffs, when you produce and consume goods entirely within Canada, you make all Canadians richer. You've provided jobs. There's the flow of money within the Canadian economy. When you move the means of production overseas, there is a net cash flow out of Canada. Canada as a country is becoming poorer, but we do it because the corporations become richer.
Exactly. And then they keep the money overseas in safe havens and we're losing our jobs. We're losing the wealth of the country.
Yeah, precisely.
And it doesn't make sense, everyone. This is all about these big globalist interests. It has nothing to do with you and your family and the interests of Canada. This is anti-nationalism. And we're going to talk about it tomorrow night. This is a globalist agenda. It has nothing to do with about you and your family and Canada, standing up for Canada. It's all about globalist interests, profit, and control. And we would argue unfair control. And that's the sad reality. So we want to wish everyone a good night. Thank you for joining us. And we're going to look at the questions tonight. I'm sorry we're not able to access it because it's going live stream, but we will look at them, and we appreciate your feedback. And thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank
you. Yeah, have a good night.
Yes, excellent.